Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the heart of matter itself. Think of it like a detective story, packed with brilliant minds, completely radical ideas, and discoveries that literally reshaped our understanding of the universe. We are going to unlock the atom.
For thousands of years, the atom was just this philosophical idea, right? The smallest possible bit of anything. But then, right around the turn of the 20th century, everything changed. Science finally had the tools to actually peek inside this invisible world, and what they were about to find was so much stranger, so much more incredible than anyone could have possibly imagined. Okay, let's get into it.
Our story really centers on three giants of physics, all in this frantic race to see the unseen. First up, we've got J.J. Thomson, who gave us the very first scientific sketch of an atom. Then comes his student, Ernest Rutherford, whose wild experiment would completely blow that first sketch out of the water. And finally, Niels Bohr, the guy who had to invent a whole new set of rules just to save the atom from destroying itself. And the craziest part? This all went down in just 15 years.
So let's start where it all began, with the first real attempt to draw a map of the atom. After J.J. Thomson discovered the electron back in 1897, he knew atoms had these little negative charges inside them. But since atoms are neutral, he had a puzzle to solve. Where was all the positive charge hiding?
And this was his big idea, the plum pudding model. I love that name. Basically, he imagined the atom was this big, fluffy ball of positive charge, that's the pudding, and then stuck all throughout it were the tiny negative electrons. Those are the plums. The source material also gives us another great visual. Think of seeds scattered inside a watermelon. It was a pretty simple, logical place to start.
So how in the world do you test a theory about something you can't even see? Well, you shoot stuff at it. And that's exactly what Ernest Rutherford's team decided to do. They set up what would become one of the most famous experiments in all of science, and its goal was simple: prove that Thomson's plum pudding idea was right.
Okay, so here's the setup. They had a little radioactive source that was basically spitting out what they called alpha particles. Think of them as tiny, positively charged bullets. They aimed this beam of bullets at a sheet of gold foil that was unbelievably thin, just a few hundred atoms thick. And then, all around the foil, they put up a screen that would light up with a little flash every time an alpha particle hit it.
Now, if the plum pudding model was correct, this whole experiment should have been, kinda boring. The idea was that since the positive charge in the gold atoms was all spread out and weak, those little alpha particle bullets should have just sailed right on through. It's like firing a BB gun through a fog bank. Sure, maybe a few would get nudged a tiny bit, but that's it.
But that is not what happened. Most of the particles flew straight through, just as expected, but some were deflected at crazy angles. And get this, about 1 in every 8,000 bounced almost straight back. Rutherford famously said it was as if you fired a 15-inch naval shell at a piece of tissue paper and it came back and hit you. Something was seriously, fundamentally wrong with the plum pudding model.
Rutherford chewed on this for a while and realized there was only one possible way to explain that shocking result. The only way an alpha particle could get knocked back like that was if it smacked into something incredibly small, incredibly dense, and carrying a powerful positive charge. And just like that, the pudding model was dead. The atom's positive charge wasn't spread out at all. It was all crammed into a tiny little point right in the middle. He had just discovered the atomic nucleus.
This one discovery completely changed the picture. So, we threw out the plum pudding and brought in the new nuclear model. And this new model, it looked a whole lot like a miniature solar system.
You can't overstate what a huge shift this was. We go from Thomson's model, basically a solid blob with bits mixed in, to Rutherford's, where you have this tiny, heavy, positive nucleus at the center and these little electrons orbiting it like planets. But the biggest shock of all? The atom went from being a solid thing to being almost entirely empty space.
And when I say mostly empty space, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around it. The source material points out that an atom is proportionally more empty than our own solar system. It's just mind-boggling. It means this solid world that we see and touch is basically an illusion, all built on these vast, empty atomic structures.
So Rutherford's model was this huge step forward, right? It explained the gold foil experiment perfectly. But it had a problem. A really, really big one. A fatal flaw. Because according to all the known laws of physics at the time, Rutherford's atom couldn't possibly exist.
So here's the crisis. Classical physics, the physics of Newton, says that any charged particle that's accelerating has to give off energy as radiation, as light. And well, an electron moving in a circle is accelerating. That means it should be constantly losing energy. And as you can see here, that would cause it to spiral inwards, crashing into the nucleus in less than a trillionth of a second.
So, the new model had two gigantic problems. First, there was the stability issue. If classical physics was right, every atom in the universe should have collapsed ages ago. But obviously they haven't. We're here. And second, there was the light problem. As that electron spiraled in, it should have been emitting a continuous rainbow of light. But that's not what scientists saw. When they looked at light from hot gases, they saw these weird, sharp, distinct lines of color, a unique fingerprint for every single element. Rutherford's model had no explanation for this at all.
The solution came from a young physicist from Denmark working in Rutherford's own lab, a guy named Niels Bohr. And Bohr had a truly radical idea. He realized the problem wasn't the model, it was the rules, the old laws of physics. He basically said, look, down at the atomic scale, the rules just have to be different.
Bohr put forward three revolutionary new rules, or postulates. First, he just declared that electrons can hang out in certain special, stable orbits. And for some mysterious reason, they just don't radiate energy. He just broke the old rule. Second, he said that not just any orbit is allowed. There are only specific, fixed orbits available to the electron, kind of like special lanes on a highway. And third, and this is the big one, he said electrons can jump between these allowed orbits. And when they jump down to a lower orbit, they spit out a single packet of light, a photon, with a very specific amount of energy.
And that third rule, that was an absolute stroke of genius. It was the key that finally explained the mystery of those bizarre spectral lines, the atomic fingerprints that had been confusing scientists for decades.
Remember these fingerprints? Classical physics had absolutely no idea why elements would only give off these very specific colors of light. It made no sense. But Bohr's new quantum rules, well, they provided a solution that was just stunningly elegant.
This diagram shows it all. Each of those allowed orbits has a specific energy level. So when an electron makes a quantum leap from a higher energy orbit down to a lower one, the extra energy it had gets released as a single photon of light. And because the energy gap between any two orbits is always the same, the color of that light is always the same. A jump from level 3 down to level 2 creates one specific red line. A jump from 4 to 2 creates a different blue-green line. And just like that, the atomic fingerprint made perfect sense.
Bohr's model was an incredible triumph. It saved Rutherford's nuclear atom, and it perfectly explained the hydrogen spectrum. He even won a Nobel Prize for it. But as brilliant as it wasn't the end of the story. It was more like a crucial bridge, connecting the old familiar world of classical physics to the bizarre new world of quantum mechanics.
In fact, about a decade later, another physicist named Louis de Broglie came up with an even deeper reason for Bohr's strange rules. He suggested that electrons don't just act like particles, they also act like waves. And it turns out Bohr's special allowed orbits were just the ones where the electron's wave could fit perfectly around the nucleus, creating a stable standing wave, kind of like a vibrating guitar string. Any other orbit, and the wave would just cancel itself out.
Now, we have to be honest. The Bohr model had its limits. It was fantastic for hydrogen, which only has one electron, but it totally fell apart when you tried to use it on more complicated atoms. It also couldn't explain why some of those spectral lines are brighter than others. It was an absolutely essential, brilliant step on the ladder, but it was clear that a more complete theory was still needed. That theory would be quantum mechanics.
So, what a journey, right? We've gone from a simple plum pudding to a miniature solar system and then to this bizarre quantum reality of fixed orbits and sudden leaps. Bohr's model gave us that first crucial glimpse into the strange new rules that govern reality itself. It paved the way for the whole field of quantum mechanics. But it leaves us with this one big question. What else did it take to finally build our complete picture of the atom? Thanks for joining me for this explainer.